I'm pretty sure almost all of us have played in the sandbox when we were young, and some of us still do. Year 2 Nico. No, but sand tracks are one of my favorite kinds of tracks in MxBikes, and I had some question on what to think about when riding sand tracks. So this is the thing I think about when I ride sand, and what most of the pros also do to go fast in sand tracks. So on sand tracks there tend to be a lot of bumps on the straightaways. The way we want to handle these bumps is that we want to make sure that the front end is light and stays on top of the bumps, and let the rear suspension do all the work. So in sand tracks it's all about the front wheel placement on top of the bumps. So an example here is we have this long section of just bumps, but as we come to the first bump here, you can see we keep the front end up and we actually do a wheel tap, and moving on to the next bump, I'm aiming my front tire to land on top of the bump. This way the front wheel stays on top of the bumps, and we let the rear suspension soak all the bumps up to make it smoother and faster. So it will look something like this. We come out of the corner, hit the first bump, get the front wheel up, we do a wheel tap, and we keep the front end up on top of the bumps and let the rear suspension do all the work to make it smoother and faster. And the way we lift up the front wheel and do wheelies and stuff like that is, if you look here, I'm leaning back, but as I'm taking off, I'm still leaning backwards, but at the very end, as my rear tire is about to leave the ground, I'm actually leaning forward. And we do a similar thing when we bounce on top of the bumps, is that when we take off, we actually stay a little bit central, just to make sure that the front end actually lands on top of the bumps here and not go down or up too much. Here is another example where we kind of bounce off of this bump here. It's a very small bump, and we lean a little bit more forward as we have taken off, and you can see we just keep the front end up all through the section, and you basically just don't really feel any of the bumps because the rear suspension just soaks it up by itself. So in first person it will look something like this. Make sure you have a good corner, leaning back and then leaning forward a little bit to make sure to get the front tire up. And we can do a little wheelie here. So let's look a little bit closer on corners. When you're riding sand, you don't really have as much traction sideways, so it's really important that you get settled into the rut and actually get a nice lean angle on the rut. So you can see I'm really leaning against the side of the rut here to keep the bike straight compared to the ground. Oftentimes we don't really want to sit too much in sand corners, because you can have corners like this where there's a big bump, and by standing up you're more agile, you're able to move the bike around and position it better, and you basically have more control. And if you sit down and you hit the bump, you can't really control the bike, you will kind of just follow the bike. Whereas if you stand, you can kind of counteract the bump. And with the decreased amount of traction and the drag, like the bike is getting slowed down even when you're going in a straight line compared to normal soil. So it's harder to accelerate and it's harder to keep speed even going in a straight line. So it's even more important now that you open up the corner. So if we want to hit the inside over here, so you can see I'm lined up on the very left side here, but I want to get to the inside. You can see I'm just cutting across here. You can see I'm cutting across the corner and I'm entering wide. And the wider the corner, the faster we can go in it. So making it as wide as possible and as straight as possible will help us carry as much speed as possible. So if we take a look again, start up on the left here, we cross over to make a straight line here. Then we don't have to slow down as much as if we were hitting on the inside here. So we can basically enter faster. Another important thing, since the track is so bumpy, like there are bumps everywhere, we can actually kind of jump into corners. So you can see I'm taking off from this bump and I'm jumping all the way into the corner to make it really smooth and thereby faster as well. And you can see I'm not braking, I'm just jumping in, keeping my momentum, because the sand is already slowing us down enough. So the best way to slow down on a sand track is most of the time to just let off the throttle, because the sound will naturally slow us down because of the increased drag. Another example of line choice would be this corner, and you can see we enter on the left side here, so we can get a wide entry to the corner. And what we do is we actually jump and land and downside the first bump over here. You can see we aim to downside over here. If we look nice and smooth. And the thing we can do now is that we jump straight into the corner. So we're basically smoothing out this part of the track. But basically the goal by jumping bumps like this is to make tracks smoother, and in this game and on sand tracks it's very important that smooth is fast. So let's talk about the juicy stuff, and by the juicy stuff I mean suspension. And the thing I'm looking for in a sand setup is first of all to have a high front. If you remember what I talked about earlier with the bumps, we want the front end to stay light and on top of the bumps. So by having a higher front, it's easier to get the front end up and over the bumps. And to get a higher front, click on the right, and this number is going to get down. And that means the bike is going to be higher in the front. But a side effect of making the bike higher in the front is that the turning is going to be affected. Because the taller it is in the front, the more straight it wants to go. So you have to balance it so where it's high enough so you get it over the bumps, but low enough so it turns well. The second thing I usually like to do is go a little bit lower on the rebound. As you can see, the rebound is 15 on the default setting and I'm running 10. This is maybe a little bit extreme. So basically the thing I'm looking for on the rebound is if we have a higher rebound, rear tire is going to extend back out faster, whereas I have a low rebound, it's gonna extend out slower. If you have it higher, it might want to dive down a little bit in the front when you hit the bumps. So basically by lowering the rebound, it's gonna swallow the bumps better, but it's not gonna extend back out as fast. So it might feel a little bit easier to get the front end up compared to a high rebound. Now you don't want to go too far in either direction, because if the rebound is too low, it's not gonna be able to extend fast enough before the next bump. So if we would have a really slow rebound, it would still not have extended when we hit the next bump. But if we have a fast rebound, it might want to dive a little bit in the front when we hit the bumps. So basically the reason I'm running a lower rebound is because I feel like it soaks up the bumps better and it's easier to get the front end up. If you have a setup you're comfortable with, go 2 clicks slower on rebound and go 2 clicks higher on the front and go from there. As for tires, I recommend the 100 tire for 250s and the 110s for 450. 450 you could also go with a 120, it's a little bit more personal preference, but for 250s I recommend the 100 because it's faster in a straight line because you have less friction compared to the 110s. But I'll talk more about that in my setup video. Tire pressure, I like to run 0.9 bars. You can just Google it and convert it to whatever you are using. Basically we run a little bit higher tire pressure also to have less friction on the tires, to be able to go a little bit faster in straight line. So as for a quick recap while I'm riding, make sure to have the front end light and over the bumps. Doing wheelies or jumping on bumps is a really great way to do this, but you gotta have speed out of the corners. And as for corners, usually stand up, make sure to get into the berm correctly, make sure you have a nice wide line into the corner, and jump the bumps so you get a smooth line into the corner, and you can just carry your speed to make the track as smooth as possible. As for setup, I like to run it a little bit higher in the front, a little bit slower rebound, just to be able to get the front end higher easier, and just to have the front end stay over the bumps a little bit easier, and also to handle the bumps to soak them up a little bit better. But yeah, that's all for this video. If I missed something, leave a comment, or if you have any questions, you can also leave a comment. Also, if you have any great suggestions on free sand tracks that are like more intermediate level, leave a comment, or if you have whatever favorite sand tracks you like, just leave a comment and I read through them. If any questions, leave a comment or contact me through Discord and I will respond when I have time. Yeah, if you want the setup tutorial, I will be dropping that for my next video probably, so make sure to subscribe and have that notification bell on. So just enjoy the rest of my lap.